to you from Australia, the land down under, for Revolution Radio on revolution.radio. Home to ideas. Ideas are dangerous. Dangerous. Also, hopefully, lively conversations in the chat room. Chat rooms are dangerous. Dangerous. I'll talk about that in a second. And it's also a place to use the archives, which are free archives. Which brings me to an important point. Something that is not free is electricity. So if you can donate, please do. Keeps the service running. That's goodness. Hopefully you like that. And then, until we can harness lightning, we have to pay for electricity. That's just how it is. So if you can donate, any currency is good, including crypto. And maybe you can't donate. And that's more and more people these days, I reckon. Maybe you can tell people on the station. That's helpful too, right? The more people know, the more likely it is that somebody will, in fact, donate at some point, which is really all we're asking. So please, help us out here. It would be awesome if you could. Today is Thursday, the 14th day of March, 2024. It's never going to happen again, ever. Not ever. This is today.
He speaks the truth.
That's what I do. The truth is dangerous. It's yes, it is. It's almost a quarter, I should say, into the new year.
Oh my goodness!
I know, right? Now you can catch the cave on the air, on the line, and onto your smart device, on the line all the time. So grab an app to listen anywhere, or listen at home on the grace table of digital radio. If you like to put your feet up and have a cup of hot cocoa, why not? Why not? Before we start broadcasting at you in anger, which we will do post haste, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we broadcast. And for Dave,
it's the Bunjalung.
Thank you, sir. And for myself, of course, here in what was quite warm today, it's the Darak people. And we would like to pay our respects to elders, past, present, and future. Thank you very much. Yes. Chat rooms are dangerous. Well, what Napoleon did, he closed all the coffee houses in Vienna and throughout most of Europe, because in coffee houses there ferments the revolutionary spirit. True enough. It's beer halls and coffee houses, believe it or not. Those are the dangerous places where thought bubbles are created and people fall into revolutionary gangs and plot all manner of mischief. So ideas are bad, okay? Yes, independent thought alarm, Dave.
Wow, that's a couple of shows you've quoted now. I'm happy.
Hey?
Yeah.
I do what I can. But to be serious, just for a second here, we are precipitously close to an actual all-in, all-out, go-for-war kind of scenario. The French say, "Hey, we're going to put boots on the ground." The Israelis are preparing to attack Rafah, Gaza Strip. It's a couple of civilians still there. And the thing is this, there'll be massive knock-on effects. Right? I mean, the Russians have lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Think about that for a second. Hundreds of thousands. It's almost, I mean, we're talking like World War I kind of battlefield losses, right? Because we're not talking terribly many battlefields here. These are numbers that we will get from the Somme and Verdun during World War I. I mean, where millions of soldiers on each side would be mowed down in machine gun fire. And this new conflict in Ukraine is reminiscent, in fact, of World War II. And all the things we come to love about the Russians there, where They say, go, fight, or we shoot you, which is pretty much what happened here. Go fight or we shoot you. And spoke to a friend tonight. He actually watches, it's called Telegram, I think, or some such, where
That's right.
the actual footage of the conflict zone, the actual footage.
Yeah, that's right.
And they say they're setting in meat wave after meat wave, if you will.
That's correct.
Which is, it's a horrific image, to be honest. But ultimately, that's what people, I guess, I mean, that's what happens. That's the world we live in. It's just, it's almost...
So there's a channel that I watch on YouTube that can't show you the footage. Denis Davyov, also Daniov, and he also has a Telegram channel, which
that's it. That's the guy my friend watches as well. That's it.
Yeah, it is, and I've sent you the links. And
thank you.
Yeah, Telegram has the unedited raw footage, and he actually gets it from both sides of the conflict, because it's some of the footage is posted on the Russian kind of internal. They've got a website for that, and he can grab it from there and post it. It's I remember hearing, Becky, that the first footage from live war, wasn't it the Vietnam War?
Yeah.
That went live and to air, and it changed people's perspective of what war was.
Correct.
Entirely.
It was also the first serious censorship of what the American government would allow TV stations to show.
And so now we've got a platform that shows it unedited, uncensored, and look, to be honest, I think if you're certainly, Mackie, if you're our age, you are desensitized to almost everything that exists out there, and I can happily watch that footage knowing that I'm seeing the real thing. I can absolutely watch it, and I'm affected by it in a number of ways, and I think the first one is it's such an unnecessary loss of life that it's beyond me to describe how I feel about that. That's number one. I'm going to say I'm still outraged that a leader can summon that amount of, I'm just going to use the term again, meat waves, to try and gain land when your hardware is diminishing, and an ally that you have will certainly benefit from your weakening as a nation, and that's awful. And secondly, we've seen from a military hardware perspective, which I studied a long time ago now. Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm entirely impressed by the change of the battlefield and what simple ordnance, if you will, can take out multi-million-dollar machines.
I know, the drone warfare has changed, put everything upside down. It's incredible.
Totally changed the battlefield. So from a technology perspective, I'm a student of that. What's a weapon? What's a weapons platform? What kind of weapons there are, and what kind of damage they can do. And I've got to say, all conflicts accelerated beyond imagination. The technology for use in battle, every single battle has, because it's make a mod, counter the mod. Make a mod to counter the mod. It's the patch for the crack. You know what I mean? So it's an ever increasing technology level, and the only thing we haven't seen yet, and I will flick you this video when we're done, so we can talk about it maybe on Sunday, but a small drone that can sit on your palm, that's only 2 inches across, can use its own AI and face recognition to take a person out
Oh yeah.
by choice. It chooses to do it. So
The-
you've got to see that's where we're going, and you can't fight a million of those, Becky. It's impossible.
No, it's of course it is. It's like trying to fight a swarm of bees. It's a
I got stung by a
completely,
bee on the foot today. You're a psychic,
Oh, well.
Becky. Look at you go.
See, I picked up on that, my friend.
Mhm.
In fact, my wife's cousin at MIT, he developed insect drones. He was actually got a prize for it. He was in the paper as well. So he develops drones that are the size of insects and fly like insects. Not by himself. It was a working group. So shout out to him. Good work there. I think it's an amazing achievement. But look, the drones are getting smaller and more and smarter. Right? But there's the thing you said, and that reminded me of another thing. You said unnecessary. The unnecessary deaths
Mhm.
that you or that we witness, certainly. And I just want to look. It comes down to why are Dave and I doing this? Why are we going on this platform? Why do we feel compelled to talk to you, to share our thoughts with you, to highlight certain things to you? Because it's our duty. And once again, I feel it necessary to mention that a lot of people find it very hard to believe, to internalize the fact that their government would do something that will deliberately harm them. Right? A lot of people have really don't think that their government would do that. Right? A lot of people truly believe their government will do right by them. Now, Putin happens to be an extreme person here, on a fairly far edge of the spectrum, but still on the spectrum. And he's sending hundreds of thousands of his fellow Russians, not enemies, but people he dislikes, fellow Russians, young men for the most part, to a certain death. Why? In order to gain territory, the Ukrainian territory, and achieve certain geopolitical strategic aims. That's really what he's doing, right? But hundreds of thousands. Just sit down for a second and think about that, right? You think about how many people you know. Think how many people live in your city or your town or your village, right? And if it's Sydney, we've got about 6 million people here. So if there were 400,000 people killed, right? That's a huge chunk of our population.
Yeah.
You can twist it any which way you want. It's a massive chunk of the population. And if you live in a smaller place, it might be more than you have, living in your town or village. And it's certainly more people than you know. Even if you're the most popular person on Facebook, well, except maybe for Zuckerberg. Nobody has got 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000 friends. Now, so these are the people that he's willing to sacrifice himself. And it's not finished yet, by the way. It's not finished yet. Hundreds of thousands of people. And that's Russia, that's Putin, that's like dictatorship, autocracy, crazy, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can say all of this. It's not the way the Russian people see it, obviously. They don't think he's a crazy autocratic dictator. Well, not all the Russians, anyway. America does the same, has done the same for a long time. Tens of thousands of young men, mostly, died in the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And it was clear to everybody the Vietnam War could never be won. They were thinking of launching nuclear strikes against Vietnam, if you know. Right? That actually was considered. Because it was just impossible to fight in the jungle. It's just you couldn't win. But America sent these young people to die anyway. And the question is why? Well, the answer is to fight communism. Mm-hmm. That's a fairly, abstract kind of thing. You can't defeat an ideology. You can't kill a meme, a thought. It's not possible. Again, it was territory. We didn't want the Chinese or the Russians to gain, too much of a foothold in Southeast Asia. So it was really territorial, like two competing. Well, it's not really two competing. There's several competing ideologies, but I'm not going to split hairs here.
It's
And it's
honestly, it's two street hookers complaining about which side of the street.
That's pretty much right, yeah. But the same thing, but then you'll say, yeah, but that was a long time ago. And I'll say to you, no, it wasn't a long time ago, because the same thing happened in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Same thing happened. Right? Mm-hmm. In fact, there was no good reason to invade Afghanistan. There was even less of a reason to invade Iraq, right, Dave?
Yeah, well, that's it. I saw a comedian talking about this today.
Oh, okay.
Saying they were likening, well, I talk about all the wars currently, and then they said, well, you can just trust us to go into war in one country because you ticked us off, and then fight another one nearby.
Well,
it was very funny, because that's all I'm saying.
Look, it is funny.
I didn't steal your joke. I can't remember who the comedian was, but yeah, no, love your work.
But look, if you read the great chess game by Brzezinski, I think it was, Zbigniew, I can't remember, I've got the book here somewhere. But the point is, there's a plan laid out by the neocons, right, for the new American century, the Bush administration, the second Bush administration. They were going after Iran, they were going after Iraq, going after Afghanistan, they were going after Libya. The last one, really the only remaining, well, two really, but the one that they really want is Iran.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what Mickey and I have been waiting for.
Well, with this whole thing happening in Gaza now, right? Mm-hmm. Especially now that we've entered Ramadan, which is the holy fasting month for the Muslims, which is, look, it's similar to Lent in many ways, right? And you got 1.5 to 2 million civilians in Rafah. If the Israelis go in, and they want to go in very soon, okay, there's no ceasefire yet, nothing, so that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. So Biden couldn't arrange that. The loss of life in Rafah is going to be catastrophic. I mean, it's already catastrophic. I'm running out of words, Dave, to describe the
no more superlatives for you.
Right? But so that's where we are. So that's what jogged my memory there. But there's another thing, and this is really important that you brought up. This is the ease with which drones can be used to, kill, really. I mean, that's what we're doing here, right? Because for the longest time we were thinking, it's going to be robots on the battlefield fighting each other. That's a complete nonsense, because robots are very expensive. It's much cheaper to send people to die than kill. And now that we've found a cheap way, which is drones, no one is going to send robots like the Boston Dynamics robots. There's no way they're going to be sent on the battlefield, because people will always be cheaper. They're always more expendable. It's just how it is. A robot costs a whole bunch of money to make. I don't want to sacrifice those. That's insane. And the thing is this. That's why I guess the Star Wars saga of the Clone Wars makes sense, because because they were fighting the android armies of the great trading houses, right? That's right. Whereas the clones were actually cheaper to make than the droids, even though they're being mass produced as well. They're quite. I mean, if you look at the droids, they're cut down. They're like minimized to the nth degree, right? Like only the most essential items are actually in the droid. Okay, so they're the fighting droids, right? They're thin and quite skeletal, and there's not much excess on it, so they're fairly cheap. But clones were cheaper still.
But everything defeated the robots.
That's the truth.
Except they're no match for the droid cars. They had shields. They were good.
There you go.
But the other ones were completely useless. They were like just military grunts.
Oh, they were. Yeah, he's cannon for that. Just telling you, there's another metal wave coming in. But so we have now the battlefield of the future is really this.
And it's getting cheaper, even as this battle is going on 2 years in.
Oh yeah.
In Ukraine, they were initially sending military drones, they're crazy numbers. You can't buy one for your kid, right? You can't come home, on their birthday going, "Hey, I bought you a military drone." Well, now the toy drones are being converted
Yeah, because they're
and
cheap.
being used
Cheap and
because they're so cheap. Yeah, yeah.
look, they actually gave them away at lunches, dinners, and conferences that I attended.
Yeah.
I got 4 of them for my kids, and they worked just fine as little drone things, right? And why not? I mean, they're kamikaze drones. It doesn't matter. They're going to get blown up anyway, right? So who cares? But
Well, the
but the
one that I've
important thing,
shared with you, Mackie,
sorry,
has a shaped charge,
uh,
right? The one I've shared with you, and it was from six
yeah,
years ago, and it cost nearly nothing to make. Has a
yeah.
shaped charge, and if it recognizes your face, it will fly in to your forehead and explode the shaped charge, which neutralizes you. I mean,
Yeah.
permanently.
Well, that's a euphemistic way of putting it. But that's the battlefield of the future, though, and it is no longer necessary to be the most powerful military in the world.
Mm-hmm.
If you, let's say, for argument's sake, maybe you're just a smaller country that isn't very rich, but let's say you have 5 million drones, right, which will cost you, let's say, they cost $100 each. So it costs you half, $500 million. You might be able to scrape that together. For a government of a country, that should be doable. But even if you only had 100 million or 50 million dollars, right? And you either get maybe 500,000 drones or a million drones, and you load them all up with C4 or plastic or Semtech or whatever have you,
Mm-hmm.
and you fly it into the path of enemy fighter jets, enemy cruise missiles, enemy ground troops, enemy tanks, and only one of those, depending on the size, of course, but only one of them, if they carry a high explosive, and make no mistake, plastic, Semtech, C4, and the other more sophisticated explosives, they're powerful. They're powerful. And they can blow up any given target. And even if they don't blow it all up, they can damage it enough so it becomes immobilized and unusable. And that's really the key here, right? But if you launch a million of these things, right, there's no way you can shoot them all out of the sky.
You can't.
Okay? That's not going to happen. And maybe you put a canister of poison gas on them. And who knows, right? The world is your oyster. Do what you want. But you no longer need to maintain a military, is my point. Right? Even small countries, to Dave's point, can now afford to repel a numerically superior attacker. Even if they've got better military tech, it doesn't matter. If you have enough drones and explosives, that's really all you need. It's I mean, and you don't even need a lot of military infrastructure. You have a few underground bunkers where you can fly them from, or whatever, or hangars. I don't care.
You don't need very much at all. Just remember, in Japan, they had caves in the mountains with catapult-launched fighter jets.
That's right.
They didn't get to use them, but that's what they had, expecting a ground invasion.
But that's exactly right. And people are ingenious. They come up with better ways of doing things than Dave and I can describe now. But so that's all you need. And you have a few redundant control centers, right? Yeah. So if one gets taken out, the other one takes over, and then it's and today the chips, the software, the algorithms, even the range of the remote control that we have access to now.
That's true. Yeah.
Is phenomenal. I mean, even if you require line of sight, you can bounce it off a satellite or a repeater tower or whatever you have here. I mean, you could do all of that, right?
Well,
yeah.
So the Russian vehicles, the BMPs and the tanks, now have a shoddily constructed cage above the entryway at the top. And they also have radio emitters, so they interrupt the view from the remote pilot's perspective. As they get close, the screen whitens out. You can't see anything. It frosts out, and that's really interesting because that's, remember, you make an innovation and your enemy will try to counter it. It's not entirely successful, though, but now they have an individual soldier who has an inbound radio source detector, which will be a drone who is transmitting, and they have a double barrel shotgun on their person, and what their intention is to do is to shoot it before it gets too close enough to harm you.
Makes sense.
And they're covering the tanks with people now.
Yeah.
So that you're protecting the tank, the very valuable tank, with your meat wave.
But see, that's my point. It is, people are so much cheaper than the hardware. It's astounding, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what I would do, though, if I were a drone controller, I would fly the drone into the barrel of the tank or onto the tread. That's what I would do. I mean, it's enough to blow up the barrel or the tread.
Yeah. Well, the drone carries so much explosives now that it'll still completely destroy the tank's ability to run, immobilizing it. It'll wipe everyone off the top of the surface of the tank, usually either in flames or in varying states of aliveness. That's the best way of putting it. And I have to say that's surprising to see. That's the level. That's the level of counter that is important. And by
you see, to me,
the military generals that are ordering it, you know what I mean?
To me, that speaks very clearly to what the Russians, and we discussed this before.
Yeah.
The Russians truly expected this to be over very, very quickly.
On the weekend.
Okay? Yeah. And what they're resorting to now is this meat shield approach, because that's what this is really, is speaking to their inability to, purchase as well as manufacture new military equipment. So it is easier and cheaper by far to sacrifice all these people than it would be to try to replace a tank or armored transport or whatever have you. And once you realize just how expendable human beings are, everything else kind of clicks into place, and you should realize how these parasites truly think about you.
Oh yeah.
Which is not at
Chattel.
all, really.
It's chattel, isn't it? That's the way.
Yeah. It's like, oh, how many have died? Oh, we just lost 50,000 in this battle. 50,000. How many do you have left?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got another 10 million people waiting. Oh, another 10 million. Sweet. So I can go another 20 weeks like this. Yes, sir. That's quick math. Wonderful. I've got enough cannon fodder for half a year. Done and done. Keep going.
Well, if you can make your enemy run out of ammunition, that's still a victory.
It is. It's not a good victory.
Sorry, what?
It's called a Pyrrhic victory, which you don't want, but you're right, Dave.
Well,
it's a victory.
You only have to have one more person than they have to win.
I'm sorry, maybe it's too soon, but just imagine that just one lone Russian soldier on what used to be the Ukraine is now just like a plowed field, waving the Russian flag. We won! Oh no, that's me. I won!
that's right. What? I won. Yeah.
That's actually a really horrific image if you think about it for a second. Do you know what I mean? It's
I have to laugh and I've got to make fun of it. I've got to see it in a fun light, otherwise it's just so totally disturbing. And in this day and age,
this is what boggles the mind, right? I mean, these kinds of battles, we expected. We saw in World War One. We did see it because World War One was being fought with relatively modern weapons, but still with the mindset of the 19th century, cavalry and all that. And the bayonet charge, that's the bayonet charge on barbed wire. That's a good idea.
Do I get any ammunition? No, you got your trusty bayonet. Fixed bayonets.
Crazy. Yeah, fixed bayonets. Don't shoot until you see the white in the eye.
Yeah.
Um, it's really the level of callousness and disregard. Because look, this is the thing. If you're facing an existential threat, like you could argue the Ukrainians are,
Mm-hmm.
then you understand why they would fight to the last. That makes sense. You fight. If someone attacks you, you're defending your family, your friends, your country, your livelihood, your history, your culture against obliteration, because that's what you fear. You fear that someone's going to obliterate you, right? It's the same if you're in the street. Like if you do martial arts and you're in dojo, it's quite civilized. You don't
Mm-hmm.
try to kill each other. But if you're in the street, and I want you to understand this, and someone attacks you, you have to assume they want to kill you, because they're attacking you in the street. I mean, you could.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, one bad fall, you could crack your head. So you must fight as though they want to kill you.
That's
So
right.
you must kill them first. It's just self-defense. But this, so you can, so what the Ukrainians are doing is self-defense, and nobody would argue any other way. And you could understand why they would fight as hard as they do, and why they send people, and people actually willingly go to fight. They do that. I mean, that's the thing, right? With the Russians, not so much. A lot of Russians are fleeing Russia because they don't want to be conscripted. They've released prisoners now as well. I don't know if the Wagner group still exists or not, but using mercenaries from other countries. They've run out of the regular army. They're all gone. So now more people are being conscripted into the army every day, and they're sending one wave after another wave after another wave into the fight with complete disregard. And you have to ask yourself here this: why are they fighting? So the ordinary Russian is fighting, I imagine, because they were told, if you don't fight, we'll kill you, we'll shoot you if you run back, right? That's one. But maybe they believe that they are getting rid of the Ukrainian Nazis, such as they are, if they exist or not, I don't know, right? But
or taking back part of their homeland.
Or that,
depending on how far back in history you look, sure, why not?
That's the thing. Yeah, it's all a little spurious. So the Russian case here for this war is probably not as strong, but nonetheless, there are hundreds of thousands of Russians that have been killed in this conflict, and at some point there will be a reckoning. Right? People in Russia. At some point, and this is actually what broke the back of the Tsar in World War I. You see, the war wasn't going very well for Russia. Okay, the casualties were mounting. People in Russia were really upset. Famine was approaching, and the communists or the Bolsheviks at the time, took advantage of the situation and riled up the people against the royal family, to the point where it did come to a revolution. The royal family was rounded up and summarily executed, with a couple of exceptions potentially. There's some stories of some people getting away, and that was what happened, because World War I was going exceedingly bad for Russia, and of course the revolution, the execution of the Romanovs, led to the exit of the Russian forces out of World War I. Are we going to see this here as well? Is it going to get so bad, in fact, in Russia? So many people. You're wiping out an entire generation, Dave. There's 150 million people, I think, in Russia. I think that's about right? Thereabouts. I think it's about 150. And let's say 400,000 people have been killed or wounded, maybe 500,000.
Yeah.
Right? You have to look at the population distribution. I think we're wiping out an entire generation of young men.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Like I said before, the Russian bride websites are going to have a boon when this is done, because there won't be any Russian males of marrying age.
Yeah, you're right. It's actually in many ways it's terrifying. 144 million, and they're actually down by 268,000.
Yeah. Wow.
So the net change.
Yeah, that's right. We saw the dip on a prior show, didn't we?
Yeah, that's correct. So the net change is in fact about 300,000, but down, right? So that's including births as well, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and Ukraine, of course, has got a significant downturn as well, as you can imagine. So that's 0.2% for Russia down. So that's a lot of, a lot of people, and people have actually leaving. So the numbers here say in the last year, 140,000 people net
Hmm.
emigrated from Russia somewhere
Yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah.
So they didn't have an influx of immigrants, but they had a net population loss, not due to death, but due to people leaving the country. 140,000. So it's a 500,000 people that Russia is down. You might think, 144 million, that's not so much. Well, if the trend continues, that's going to be a lot. And if the war tempo accelerates and more casualties are sustained, you have to ask yourself at what point the war becomes untenable. How many people can be lost in any given conflict before the
Yeah,
conflict is no longer viable?
what's the cost? That's right. What's the
Yeah,
human cost to it? So,
yeah,
in this case, because resources are certainly at a minimum for Russia, and they're currently buying munitions from a number of countries because they can't make them themselves any longer.
mm-hmm.
It's one of those diminishing return capers because they're losing a whole bunch of military hardware that they can't replace. They're not
That's right.
building the planes to the extent that they're losing them. They're not even in a net zero for this. They're in a huge negative. It's going to take them a decade to bring those planes back into the numbers that they had before the conflict, and then the helicopters, the aviation. So, Mackie, I had a look at a few stories going back as far as I could in the last, say, 30 years, and China and Russia have been, dancing about with some side eye going on because they both believe that the other is an enemy, and in one way or another, either it's in the Arctic Circle, it's a resource, conflict.
Yeah.
China's growing, and Russia sees that, and I think it's an untrustworthy alliance at the current rate. And I've seen some narratives that support both yes or no's on that. I'm not going to take sides.
Okay.
I think I'm not going to take either side on it because I don't know what is truly true. It's like our media. If I'm getting my information from media, how much of that is real and how much isn't, and which side is correct. So there was nearly some conflicts that occurred in the last 30 years between the two countries on their own over things that happened, and decisions that have been made, announcements from one side which the other side completely hated on. And I can only see that this diminishing military from both a personnel and an equipment perspective favours China entirely in their arrangement of this, maybe as weak allies, but I only see that as being positive. From the global perspective, this does support China's narrative in the global, communications and everything we're seeing currently. And I think, well, is this a test war? And I'm asking the question again because, 2 years ago, Meki, when it commenced, we were just dumbfounded that this is a thing again, right? What do you mean land grab? What? Annexing. That's the new. It's what's in style, Meki. People are just, think that this is now viable. Oh, you can just do that? Oh, I didn't. Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't think that was a thing anymore. No, it's all on. Look what they're doing. So, I think the excuse to commence it doesn't even have to be anything real, and that's what's truly shocking me. I think that's where I'm not confounded. I'm dumbfounded, maybe, by the ease at which the community, our global community, is sending weapons, money to a certain extent, but not directly. The money's spent locally to replenish your stock on the shelves, and most countries just passing some old stock over. Except for in Australia, Mickey, we gave them Bradleys.
Yes, we did.
Fully built Bradleys. We just painted them and didn't do much else.
Too.
Yeah. They're good. They're good. But, yeah. Look, honestly, I never thought Russia was this weak, a military force, because I was always brought up with them being, equal to the US, and if they ever clashed, oh my goodness, it'd be like stalemate, right? Chess champions in the world, going back for 100 years. Russian.
That's just true. But we learned later that most of the parades in Moscow, were just props.
Like North props. Korea, Mickey. Yeah.
Make sure it doesn't rain. Okay, yes,
oh, why is that? Oh, no reason. No reason.
Oh, look, it's all mulch. And this is the truth. You see, now what worries me, Dave, greatly, is that this conflict cannot be contained. Because, okay, two scenarios. Okay, the war goes well for the Ukraine, and Russia is beaten back, at which point it becomes a target, potentially, for whoever. Right? Maybe Ukraine itself will move further into Russia, and then Russia will feel compelled to use nuclear weapons to defend itself. Maybe. Or the war goes poorly for the Ukraine, at which point I believe the Europeans, not all Europeans, but certainly I would say France, I would say Poland, I would say the Scandinavian countries, all the ones that have borders with Russia, would start putting boots on the ground in either near the border regions or Ukraine itself. Because look, I'm not making a comparison to Hitler here, right? But when Hitler started doing his stuff, going on the right side of the Rhine, right, going to annex the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, going to annex Austria back into the Reich. And nobody stopped him. It was the policy that was followed was appeasement. They said, no, let's not do anything. It makes sense for Hitler to do these things, sure, whatever. And then ultimately he attacked Poland, which was an act of war. Now, of course, he said that Poles attacked him, which is complete insanity. But, it's like Liechtenstein invading Germany. It's like not going to happen, is it? But nonetheless, that was the story. And he invaded Poland, and then of course led to a whole bunch of other things happening. France and Great Britain coming into the war, etc., etc. He also then attacked Belgium, went through Belgium into France to bypass the Maginot Line, which the French had built in anticipation of a German invasion, which was, of course, completely nullified by simply going around it. He's going to go around the fortifications through Belgium and attack France that way.
So from the north, wasn't it?
Yeah, correct. And now we're seeing, okay, so we let Putin take the Crimea. Right?
Yep.
There are a couple other smaller provinces, I guess, that Russia simply annexed. Before that, it was Chechnya. Do you remember Chechnya? Nobody talks about Chechnya.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Remember that, right? We let him. Well, it wasn't Putin then. Or he didn't start it, I should say. And now, are we going to let him? So we let him have Crimea. Are we going to let him have the rest of the Ukraine? And okay, so let's say we do. All right. Then what happens? Is he going to go after? I don't know. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, any of the Baltic states, right? They used to be part of the USSR. Why not?
You get a little hungry, Mickey. When you're fighting.
Yeah.
You get a bit used to the winds.
Yeah, that's right. Or will he go after the Central Asian republics like Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan, etc.?
Yeah, all the stands. Yeah.
They were all part of the USSR at some point.
Yeah, that's right.
So the question then becomes, well, where will he stop? Is he going to stop? And why would he stop? The thing is this: once you start conquering and you're on a roll, like Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan or Attila the Hun or Napoleon, even, right? Hitler, right? why would you stop? When do you say when? Like, when? Just say when. No, there's no when. There's no stopping. You just keep going. You keep going, and you secure what you have, and you keep going, and on you go. Certainly up to a point. And when you think, okay, I've eaten enough, and let's secure what I have. If you're smart, half smart, right? Because you don't. Conquest doesn't stop. It sort of becomes self-fueling, right? So
yeah, you got to ditch the wind, Smacky. That's it.
Yeah, this could be really bad. This could be really bad.
The Foo Fighters have a lyric that says, "Don't stop when I say when." There's considerable amount of irony in the phrasing itself, but yeah, and you can't tell what he was truly writing about when he wrote the lyrics, but it's pertinent. I think that's really important to remember about this conflict and how it can continue. See, I keep hearing people say, "Oh, but the Americans, they went into Iraq and Syria. They didn't really truly go into Syria, but yeah, sure, why not? Rockets from over the horizon, why not?" But that wasn't to own the land. I'm not defending the US's actions at all. I'm just saying there's a complete distinction between these two acts. If Putin, and I said this at day one of this conflict, and I still say it, if Russia was only going in to kill Nazis, well, have you killed them? Are you going to give the land back? And I've said that for comical reasons on pro-Russian groups or sites or whatever, right, discussions, and they absolutely hate on me for it.
Of course it is.
Of course, because I learned very quickly that's what they've been taught and told about the conflict. Oh no, we're bringing it back under our wing again.
Well, yeah, we're under our protection because they need us. In fact, there's no such thing as the Ukraine. They're just mountain Russians. That's what they are. Sure. But I just want to say something to Flea in the chat, and Flea has really been very
thank you,
proactive,
Flea.
and thank you so much for your contribution. I completely agree with that. What I'm saying here is what Dave and I guess and I are saying is not so much what Russia is attacking. What I'm talking to is Russia or Putin's complete inability to stop killing Russians. Is his complete lack of concern to send hundreds of thousands of Russians to their death. I mean, to be truthful, compared to Gaza, the Ukrainian civilian casualties are minimal. They really are. They're minimal.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Gaza, since October, the Israelis have managed to kill probably in excess of 30,000 civilians by now. 30,000.
That's right. Yeah.
The Ukrainian war has been going is now in its third year, and the Russians haven't killed anywhere near as many civilians. And I would never make that argument. What I'm saying is, quite contrary, is that the Russian losses are so staggering that I find it amazing that Russia keeps going with this. You see, this is the point I'm trying to make. It's not the effect the war has on the Ukraine, which is not good. Don't get me wrong, but the losses that Russia is sustaining are just enormous and almost beggar belief. And what I find hard to accept is that Putin thinks that those are acceptable losses in a war that, to me, doesn't seem to have a clear outcome. I mean, what are we trying to do here? He went in there to get rid of the Nazis. Okay, to Dave's point, well, once that happened, once we have denazified Ukraine, let's say that's a thing, right? Let's say it's full of Nazis. Are we then handing sovereignty back to the Ukrainians? Is that what's going to happen?
Yes.
I mean, is this just... Well, look, I agree with you. Probably not. But if this was a liberation kind of war, and Russia, selflessly sacrifices hundreds of thousands of their soldiers to free the Ukrainians from Nazi oppression,
hurrah!
Right. I'm not sure that's the case. Okay? No offense to anyone. And that's really the only point we're trying to make here in life. And I'm not saying the Russians are wrong. I'm not saying the Ukrainians are wrong or right. I'm not saying what this is realpolitik. This is actually happening. So we have to deal with what's happening on the ground. It is at this point completely irrelevant who is right and who is wrong. Okay, completely irrelevant. Doesn't matter.
We've made a unit of measure in which to be able to discuss this, and that is the loss of life.
Yeah,
that's the true cost of really what's happening here. And does it weigh up? It depends on what your goal is, I suppose.
Yeah.
The true goal.
And look, in the olden days, and Flea says he sent all the leaders to the front lines, right?
Yeah,
in the olden days,
mm-hmm.
they either the leaders, or a champion of the people would go and fight, and then if both sides honored it, then there would be the end of it. And rather than having thousands of people die, 1 or 2 people die, and I think that's much better math in anyone's book.
I mean, I'd like to see arm wrestling. That'd be great.
Arm wrestling would be incredible.
Yeah, but just imagine this one dude who an entire side of his body is just
he's all arm.
It's just all arm. Yeah.
Just a head with an arm. But how does he? What's his fulcrum? But the key point here is the unnecessary loss of life, the sheer waste, and I stand by my comment. An entire generation of Russian young men is being wiped out here.
That's right.
Okay. And it's just how it is. It's and it's what is the fight really about? I mean, I really would like to understand. I mean, apart from making Russia great again and getting access to Odessa, etc., what is the actual? I think that's the motivation. What other motivations do the Russians have here?
Well, the goal from that Tucker interview that I could understand was he wants to take all the way up to Kiev, and basically that entire coastal front going north.
Kiev is right on the Russian border. But it's right there, right? I mean, you could, if you really wanted to, and this is probably what they were thinking, you could take Kiev in a day.
That's right.
It's just how it is, right? Now, this is very, very different to the conflict we see in Gaza,
mm-hmm.
or Yemen for that matter, right? Or elsewhere. But Gaza has a very specific motivation, which is to get all the Palestinians out of Gaza. Forget Hamas. Hamas is completely irrelevant in this. We want to get the Palestinians out of Gaza. That's it. If they die, good. If we get them out other ways, also good. Don't care. As long as there are no Palestinians left by the end of this, mission accomplished.
That's the thought of the Israelis at the moment. Mackie, I saw a good question. I know we have only got 2 minutes, but so the good question today was, to a person on a TV show today, who would you, if Israel stops now, who would you say would be leading the Palestinians? Who would you suggest? And they couldn't answer the question. The Palestinian government? Yeah. But then how do you put that in place? And the secondary question was always going to shoot them. So it didn't matter who you said, you were wrong.
Yeah. Look, the Palestinian Authority was in charge of Gaza until relatively recently. It was the money that the Israelis allowed in to support Hamas that actually undermined the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, right.
Now, the Palestinian Authority is still in charge in the West Bank. They still are. It's not the PLO anymore. The PLO is really no longer a thing. But yeah, the Palestinian Authority should be in charge in Gaza. But like I said, it was the money that the Israelis allowed into Gaza
mm-hmm.
that allowed Hamas to completely undermine the Palestinian Authority, and they took over, essentially. That's what happened in Gaza. So, and that was a deliberate thing. And the reason Netanyahu, and I don't want to see Israelis, the reason that Netanyahu let that happen or allowed this to happen was because he does not want a two-state solution. You have to understand this very deeply, very fundamentally, deep in his bones. He is not interested the two-state solution. There's no two-state solution. There's no Palestinian state in any of his thinking, or in any of his right-wing allies. It just doesn't. It doesn't feature.
He got his magic eraser out and deleted it and went, "That's what I want."
If you work for Coca-Cola, you'll never drink Pepsi.
That's true.
Oh, jeez, enough. So quick. Always so quick. Look, hey, thank you so much for allowing us into your lives. However briefly, we hope that you found this at least interesting. This has been Plato's Cave. And don't go anywhere. Stay on the line. Something else coming up. But most of all, be safe.